welcome everybody to Tier List Tuesday. This is the series where we take things that we like and we give you some really garbage tier lists. Keep in mind this is entirely opinionated. My favorite stuff is not your favorite stuff, and your favorite stuff is not my favorite stuff. This is really just for fun. Today, we are going to be ranking the main series Final Fantasy Protagonists. Now, I tried to add in my own template for this. It didn't really go as planned. But I did find somebody else who was kind enough to have already had a template here. Just with a lot more characters in there than I intend to rank. So, before we get started here, you'll notice I have a ton in the area not ranking. Some of you will recognize from certain games. Up here, somebody from Final Fantasy Type 0. I can think of one of you who's going to love that. Not sure who this guy is, but we have tactics people in here. This is Ishtola from Final Fantasy XIV. These are the protagonists from World of Final Fantasy. Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII. Technically was a protagonist because of Dirge of Cerberus. Just kind of muck like that. But basically, that's pretty much what it is. There's another Type 0 guy here. Stuff like that. Stuff I'm not going to rank because I just don't want to. I think this is Ash here from Final Fantasy XII. So we're going to ignore those. Those are all down here. Ignore what those look like. We're only going to be working on the main series. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, I'm going to go in order from the first game to the last game. I have included the sequels. I will be playing them, so we're going to rank them as well. So we're going to start with the very first protagonist, which Dissidia calls the Warrior of Light, which is technically true. There is no main protagonist. It's just 4 no-story characters that are there. Because of that, I put Warrior Light in D tier. In Dissidia, they gave him a story behind him. They made him a literal Warrior of the Light, one who fights to defend the light and is willing to pay whatever cost necessary for the light. But Dissidia is not a main series numbered game. We're just using this as the info. There is no real protagonist for Final Fantasy 1. So because of that, there's nothing really to like or dislike. He just goes straight into the D tier. Next, we have Firion from Final Fantasy 2. He's another one where he has a name unlike Final Fantasy 1, although I think when you first start Final Fantasy 2, you don't actually name it, or he doesn't come as Firion. You have to name him just the same as before, but he has a real character model. Yet again, he kind of got more of a backstory when it came to Dissidia. He's a representative of the Resistance, the Wild Rose Resistance. He has his own aspirations and dreams and that, but in Final Fantasy 2, same thing. There's not much of a story. There's a little bit more of a story, but it's still not really much of a story. For that reason, we're going to put him in D tier as well. We are going to put him above Warrior of Light. Maybe. There we go. Same reason. He just doesn't really have a story. Next. Dissidia calls him the Onion Knight because the original Final Fantasy didn't actually have a real protagonist in Final Fantasy 3 as well. But in the 3DS remake, the one that we are going to be playing on this channel, he did have a name, and his name is Luneth. And that's this guy right here. So in the remake, they kind of fleshed out and gave them stories. So the 4 of them are still all equal protagonists in their own right, but Luneth is the one you get control of first. He is the one who you start as. When you start the game, and you can choose to name him, it's going to say, oh, his name is Luneth, but you can change his name. This is when they finally start to give us a little bit of story. So we know that the 4 of them are orphans. We know that they came from somewhere else, that they were brought here when they were very young by Sid. And anything else, I can't really say without necessarily spoiling. Not that it's a huge spoiler. Simply because he also doesn't have a huge amount of flesh to him. He's going to go above the D tier. He is going to go to the C tier now because they finally started putting some story in. And that was great. Final Fantasy IV is next. Cecil. Some call him Cecil. I call those people wrong. His name is Cecil Harvey, and he is the Dark Knight turned Paladin protagonist of Final Fantasy IV. I never played the original Final Fantasy IV, but I did play the DS remake, and can I tell you that this game was a story game? Oh my god. Cecil has a lot of internal conflicts. He is the captain of the Red Wings of Baron, until he gets stripped of his title, and he is also an orphan. They really like to kind of stick the orphan thing to you. He goes through a lot of personal conflict throughout the course of the game before he finally becomes a paladin, finding out that there is lost family in the world, and he ends up finding the truth to his heritage by the end of the game. Cecil was a really good character, at least in the DS version of Final Fantasy IV. I really did enjoy the story to that. It was a memorable story, and it might just be because that was the first Final Fantasy I played by myself, but I still think that he had a rather enjoyable story to him. It was a very basic dark to light, light to dark, but it finally started to introduce kind of the gray idea to Final Fantasy, which was nice. It was nice to not have it be a strictly light versus dark thing anymore. I'm going to put him in the A tier simply because of the DS story. I love it. I find it really, really fascinating what they did and how they fleshed out each individual character and gave each individual character their own background and desires and reasons for doing what they do. Final Fantasy V, we kind of go back to a little bit more of a simplistic time where the characters aren't necessarily that deep. So Bart's Klauser is his name. He is just a free roaming adventurer. He roams around with his chocobo, and I can't remember the name of the chocobo. It's Boko or something, I can't remember. I guess we will see when we get to the game. I haven't actually beaten this game, so I don't know if there's any true character development throughout, but I think it mainly focuses on the idea that Bart's is a free adventurer, which is nice. We all aspire to be free all the time. Because I don't know much about his story, and it doesn't seem like there's much of a story to me, I am going to put him in the C tier behind Luneth. It's possible I could be putting this in wrong. I don't know much about him personally, and that is a shame. I think he's a victim of his game never getting a real remake. Like, even 3 and 4 got remakes. So we were able to flesh out the stories of those protags a bit, whereas, obviously, his game was not able to do that. So I think they tried. I think, in reality, this was another attempt at a true story. If he ever got a remake for his game, I feel like he would get an amazing story. It'd be wonderful. There'd be lots of deep stuff for him, but I just don't ever see that happening. Final Fantasy VI. The protagonist for this game is, well, it's a questionable call. Dissidia calls the protagonist Tara Branford. Anybody who's played Final Fantasy VI knows that there's like 20 playable characters, and you follow a bunch of their different storylines, so you could name the protagonist any of them, but for the sake of avoiding frustration, we are going to agree and call Tara Branford the main protagonist of the game. Now, I don't know almost nothing, actually. I know almost nothing about Final Fantasy VI, so it's hard for me to properly grade Tara Branford. I only know what Dissidia told you, but I also know that Dissidia likes to come up with their own ideas, flesh it out, and just to kind of give them all meaning. This may be controversial, but with knowing nothing about her, there's not much I can do but to put her in the B tier at the very back. I'm sure she has a story. I've never played it. When we do get to it here in the series, I look forward to learning about her story and learning more about her. And I think that'll be really great. Now we start to get into the fun ones. Oh, we actually skipped one. Final Fantasy IV The After Year. His protagonist is named Theodore. His last name is Harvey, just like Cecil. He is the son of Cecil Harvey from Final Fantasy IV. This was from the sequel of Final Fantasy IV, so it follows his story, and you get to see a lot of other characters as you go through. So we will also be playing this game on here. I don't know anything about this game. I've never played the After Years, so he unfortunately has to go into the D tier as well, simply because I know nothing about him. Now we get to the more fun part. Cloud Strife. The OG, the edgiest of boys, and the double life. So, Cloud has a very difficult past, as you get to explore in the Final Fantasy VII game. He is somebody who thinks he's somebody else. And I'm not going to spoil exactly how that goes, because some of you have never played Final Fantasy VII. Some of you don't know the story. But for me, witnessing Cloud's story, having the opportunity to understand why he is the way he is, and then to eventually, by the end of the game, see him kind of become more who he is supposed to be. Final Fantasy VII Remake is doing a very, very wonderful job on kind of giving us more meat to the Cloud story, which is amazing. We spend the entirety, I feel like, of the original Final Fantasy VII playing Cloud as somebody who he is not. Only really getting the true Cloud towards the end. Where it looks like Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to take a completely different turn. So with that said, I really, really like Cloud. I love his story. I want to throw him into the A tier. I think that his story is amazing. I'm hoping Final Fantasy VII Remake keeps doing what it's doing, and they flesh out his story more. Technically speaking, I can't put him any higher because it's not really his story that's being told. The next character, I don't know if we'll be playing this game, Crisis Core, but the next character that we are going to be grading is from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. His name is Zack. He is the only character that is playable in this game. And he is a soldier first class. He is an old acquaintance of Cloud's, and as of the original Final Fantasy VII game, Cloud is deceased. But it looks like Remake might be taking a different path, as I mentioned before. Zack is a goofy, excitable youth. He loves his mentors. He enjoys fighting. He enjoys going on missions, and his aspirations are to be a hero like Sephiroth. He has a very relatable story due to the fact that he's goofy, he's fun. You know, he's not too serious, unlike his counterpart, Cloud Strife. He doesn't take things so seriously, and that can kind of get him into trouble sometimes, but at the end of the day, he is a really good fighter. I really, really like Zack's story. I like who he is, and I like that he has just a goofball persona. I'm going to go ahead and put him up in the A rank, but I'm going to put him ahead of Cecil, but behind Cloud, simply because I like Cloud's story a bit more, and I like the potential he has. Final Fantasy VIII. Now we have Squall Leonhardt. Squall, they kind of took Cloud's bad attitude and made it an entire personality in Squall. Final Fantasy VIII had a lot of really good story moments. You really get to know every single member of the cast and just who they are and what they're about and how they feel, and I think that's wonderful. I personally haven't beaten this game. I've gone about halfway through it on a couple occasions. So I don't know if Squall's attitude kind of gets a turn around towards the end. His story is good. But I don't really like him. And that's kind of what we're ranking here. We're ranking whose story is the best, who I like, type thing. So I'm going to go ahead and take him, and he's going to go in this bottom of the C tier. I don't want to put him in the D tier, because the D tier is pretty much people who don't have a story, who I don't know that well. Next, Final Fantasy IX, Zidane Tribal. Zidane, oh, Final Fantasy IX, the story. Zidane is a wonderful character with a wonderful story. You get to see him be extremely goofy at the beginning and just carefree, as befits a thief like him. And as the game progresses, you see him kind of grow, and when he finds out his true past, who he really is, you can't help but feel bad for him and everything that you know. Zidane is a wonderful character who I can really respect. I don't think, personally, he's somebody I would really associate with, especially towards the beginning of the game, because, like I said, he's a big goofball. But I'm going to go ahead and put him up in the A rank. No S's yet. Don't worry, that changes soon. Final Fantasy X. Tidus. I don't know his last name, to be honest. Tidus is kind of dumb, but he's a jock. it's kind of how he lives. His life is to play blitzball, and that's how he's introduced. So they kind of give you the stereotypical jock vibe from him, where he's not that smart, but he's a good player type thing. As the story progresses, he meets Yuna, he meets the rest of the squad, and he falls in love by the end. He's a different person willing to sacrifice his life by the end of the series, and I think that the character growth that they give Tidus throughout the entire series is just plain wonderful. I really like Tidus. I like his dedications. I like how he commits, and I really like his Brotherhood sword. I don't like him enough to put him above Zack and Cloud, but I like him enough to put him above Cecil. I think that he's a really good character. He's really well designed, and I enjoy the growth that they show in the game. Next, we would be doing Final Fantasy X-2. Yuna was a previous playable character in Final Fantasy X, turned main protagonist in X-2. She is part of the cast of 2 other female characters of this game, and the story follows her trying to essentially find Tidus. That's about all I'll say without spoiling the story, but I find what they did with her is kind of weak, but I haven't beaten this game, so it's hard to really say. I think that what she has and what she can do, it shows a lot of potential. I really like her as a character. I like how she abandons the whole summoner, white mage type thing to become more fierce and more powerful and more dangerous in order to complete her mission. I'm going to put her up in the B tier. I really like her, but I don't like her that much. Then we move on to Final Fantasy XI, but it was an online game, so we're not going to do anything with that. You can see Shen Todo over here. Final Fantasy XII, Vaughn. Vaughn is a sky pirate. He lives free. He has always aspired to be a sky pirate. Vaughn is an orphan, similarly to like 98% of this cast. I don't really have much to say about Vaughn, to be honest. I'm not a fan of who he is. He's a child. When the game introduced, he is just a teenager who's just gaining his freedom for the first time. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put him in the C tier, at the bottom of the C tier. I don't really like him, if I'm going to be completely honest. Final Fantasy XIII. Lightning Farron. Need I really say where she's going to go? Her story is basically loosed off of Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. There's a lot of parts about Final Fantasy XIII where they try to make some of the protagonists kind of similar to what they were in 7. Even down to the name, you can tell that she was based very loosely off of Cloud. Her name is Lightning, his name was Cloud. She's got a really bad attitude. She's part of the soldier organization, the military organization, all that kind of crap. But she kind of takes it a step from there, and we get to see the character growth. We get to meet Lightning and eventually find her true name, Claire, and we really get to meet who she is and love who she is. And even though none of you saw this coming, she's easily my favorite Final Fantasy character, at least among the protagonists. I have bigger favorites that are outside of the main cast. My actual full-time, all-time favorite character is actually from her game, so... And you'll hear all about that when we finally get to her game. It's a no-brainer. She's an S tier. No one's surprised. Let's move on. Final Fantasy XIII-2 allowed us to play Lightning's little sister, Sarah Farron. Final Fantasy XIII-2 was a good game. And if you try to follow it, if you can manage to stay on top of it, it's got a good story to it. It's got a shit ending. Those of you who have played this game know it has a shit ending. We hate the ending. Sarah, as a character, her entire purpose throughout the game is just to find her sister. That's all she wants. I want to find my sister. I want to find my sister. I want to find my sister. She comes off as a little whiny, unfortunately, to the point that her co-star of the game, Noel Kreis, kind of ends up having to put up with whininess from her a whole lot, and I'm not really a big fan of that. I like her as a character. I like that she kind of takes a stand and decides to try and do something herself when nobody believes her at the beginning, as you'll see when we finally get to the game. I like her. I like what she does, but I find her too whiny. So I'm going to put her in the same tier as Yuna. I'm going to put her behind Yuna. B tier. I think that she's a good character, but given her more independence and made her less about, I have to find lightning, I have to find lightning, I have to find lightning. Last but not least, King Noctis. Prince Noctis, King Noctis, it depends on what point of the game you've made it to. Noctis, along with his cast of characters, are probably some of the most relatable characters that Final Fantasy has ever given us. They are the most realistic. Their personalities are probably about what you would expect. Noctis seems to have a lot of teenage angst when you're playing through the game. He's an okay character. I like him in his adult form a lot better visually. I find him kind of whiny. When I say he's got kind of a teenage type attitude, he drags his feet a lot, it feels. He just doesn't seem to care too much about a lot of what's going on, a lot of what he has to do. And that kind of picks up towards the end of the game. So they show growth, but along with the problems of Final Fantasy 15, they didn't show enough. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and put him in C, but I'm going to put him at the top of the C tier. Yeah, that's right. He goes under Yuna. He has a lot of potential. The other characters in this game, I would rate all of them much higher than I rate him. And simply because he's so whiny throughout the game, and he clearly doesn't want to be doing much of what he is doing. With that said, that is my Final Fantasy Protagonist tier list. Nobody's surprised at who sits at the top. For me, Cloud could honestly, he could stay here at the very top of A tier. He could go to S tier. Either would make me happy. I really like Cloud as well. Everything else is pretty set in stone for where I have them. These four, obviously, all have the opportunity to rise. Terra, because I don't know her story, and same with Theodore. I don't really know his story. These two, less so, unless they ever got full, fleshed-out story remakes, but that's never going to happen. Everyone else, though, it probably... They would never change for me. This is how I feel about all the protagonists. With that said, if you liked today's video, feel free to drop a like. Let me know in the comment section if you agree with my character selections. And also go ahead and tell me about how unsurprised you are that Lightning sits at the very top of this. With that said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, or morning.